Okay, so I have my prepared waistband here with my stitch line for the top of my paper bag finish, and I have my shorts. So if you look here, I've got my front, and I know that because I've got the shaped hemline, and my back. Now what I need to do is I need to slip my waistband over my shorts, making sure the raw edge, which is here, raw edge, is facing upwards, and my seam, which I created in my waistband, is going to be facing the back. So I'm going to slip that over. So the shorts are going to go inside the waistband, like that. And if you've measured right, that should all fit. Now the first thing I need to do, I find my back, and I find my back crotch seam and the seam for the waistband, and I'm going to pin that there. Pin those so they line up. And I'm going to put my pin so it is perpendicular to the stitch where I'm going to be stitching, which is here. So perpendicular means it's a right angle, and it allows you to be able to take your pin out as you sew, because you can sew up to that pin, stop, take it out. Now you may be better off getting a friend to help you with this next part, so pinning the rest of the waistband, because you need someone to hold it together and stretch it out. Now remember, we did that notch in our waistband as well here, so that should line up with the center front crotch seam, and we can pin that. So again, pinning it so it's perpendicular to where we're going to stitch, and we're pinning it on the waistband side. So basically you just have to go around and line up your raw edges and pin. So I'm pinning, so I pin the front and the back crotch seams first, and then I'm pinning roughly where the side seams are, and then I can just put a pin in between each pin I've done, making sure the raw edges line up. Oops. And you're pinning through all 3 layers. So you got your 2 layers from your waistband and 1 layer from your shorts. Also remembering to make sure the right sides are facing. So I've got right side here, and they are facing. Now the reason why I pinned the front and the back first, well, we've got a guide for that. So we've got the seam, which lines up with our back crotch, and we got the notch, which lines up with our front crotch. And then I pinned roughly where the side seams were, here and here, and then I pinned in between. If I pin just from one spot and just move it and pin, move it and pin, move it and pin, it's not going to be evenly pinned. I might end up with a section like that, which isn't ideal. It needs to be evenly distributed, that waistband. Can you see that? All 3 layers there. 1, 2, 3. They all fit in really well. So now we're going to attach our waistband. So we're just using straight stitch and a 1 centimetre seam allowance. And this storage compartment, you can very carefully take off. That allows us to get our waistband and our shorts around this arm of the machine. so the shorts don't get in the way. Now, one thing we need to do is we need to mark an area on here about 5 centimeters wide at the center back. Remember, the center back has that seam where we joined our waistband with chalk. So I'm just going to mark roughly a 5 centimeter gap either side of that center back line. You can just see there's one mark there and one mark there. We're not going to sew that area. We need to leave that free. We need to leave a gap to thread our elastic through. So I'm going to start from this notch. It's not a notch really, it's just a mark. Line it up with a 1 line, and I can start to attach my waistband. Remembering to reverse. Now for this, I'll just bring it back a little bit. You'll need to hold it nice and flat and tight. Making sure there's nothing else getting in the way underneath. That's why we're using the arm of the machine. Alright, and we loop our waistband and shorts around that arm. So I'm just going to stitch it on. And I'm going to pull it from the front and the back to make sure it is nice and flat and even. So when I get to the pin, I can take that out. So again, hold it from the front and the back, give a really good tight pull. Here, when you get to the little overlap, make sure that's facing the right way. So that goes up like that. So it's nice and flat. And you can pull this if you need to just bring that edge down. Pull that underneath. Again, nice and tight. It's really important to keep your seam allowance at 1 centimeter because we need this gap here in between this stitch line and this one to be 3 centimeters. So our elastic, which is a little bit smaller than 3 centimeters, can fit in that gap. So again, pulling really tight from the front and the back. And then if you need to, tugging that bottom layer. Just keep it all nice and even. Now, again, you've got this flap here. Make sure it's facing the right way. And always stop to take out your pins. Now I'm coming up to my chalk mark here, so I'm going to stop when I get there and reverse. Oops, looks like my bobbin's run out. So I'll fix that up and reverse that, and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so that's my waistband attached, leaving a gap here at the center back to thread the elastic through. So now you need to measure your elastic. So the way you do that is you get the roll, you hold it against your hips and you pull it tight so it fits, but it's not too tight that's going to strangle you, and it's not too loose, it's not going to hold your pants up. Now you may need a little bit of help with that, and that's fine. I can help you. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure and cut mine, and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so I've cut my elastic. Now you can choose white or black. And you can see we've got enough space in our little channel we've created for our elastic to fit. So first things first, you get 2 safety pins, a big and a small one. The small one we're going to use to anchor the end so we don't lose it when we're threading our elastic through our little channel. Just anchoring it there to the top of my waistband. The big one we're going to use to thread. So pop that on the end of your elastic, and you're going to go through that gap in your waistband. And what you do is you thread your fabric along the safety pin, and then you pull it. Thread and pull. I'm going to continue doing that, and then I'll show you the next step. Okay, so I'm just at the end of threading through my elastic. I'm really close to getting back to that gap. And then I can get out the end of my elastic and my safety pin, give that a good pull. And then just move some of those gathers along. Right, so now the next step is you have to make sure there are no twists in your elastic. So you run your hand along, making sure it's all flat. And when you get to this point, we can take off our little anchor safety pin. Right, so there are no twists, which means I can meet up these two ends. Just get rid of the safety pins. And then what I need to do is overlap these. I can pull that out a bit, so I've got a bit of room. Overlap these about 2 centimeters. And I'm going to stitch up and down here to join it. Okay, so I'm back at my machine. I've put on my storage compartment back on. And I've got my elastic. It's a little bit awkward, but you can pull it out so you've got a bit more space. I've checked to make sure there's no twists, and then I'm just going to lay these on top of each other. And I'm going to do a reverse stitch up and down to join my elastic. Oops. Just like 4 to 6 times, make it nice and strong. Take that lever up. And then you can cut your threads. Alright, and back over here. So you've done that. So what you can do now is give that a tug. So it goes back in to your waistband there. So that is my waistband, my paper bag finish. But here we've got this gap still. So we need to stitch that together. So back to the machine. We can pop that under our presser foot. And we're going to start where we did our reverse stitch last. Reversing again, and then we're going to go all the way, closing our gap to the other reverse stitch, and reverse again. Then what you need to do, the last step, is to overlock this edge. Okay, so to overlock, couple things you need to make sure you do. It is easy if you turn them inside out. You see I've got it inside out. That way it keeps this area away from the overlocker so we don't get anything caught. So I'm going to pop it under the presser foot, pop my presser foot down, and overlock that edge. Now it may want to move around because you've got a real thick section here of elastic, and it's going to try and push your material away from the foot. So what you'll need to do is hold it from both ends, and you're going to guide it so it doesn't push it too much away. You can see on mine it is a little bit loopy, and that's because of the elastic pushing the presser foot off. So just take it real slow. I'm going to hold it from the front and the back, and I'm going to pull it. That way I have a bit more control in holding it where it needs to go on that guideline. Hope you've noticed I've got the waistband on top as I overlock around. And every now and then just make sure there's nothing getting caught under here. And you're only overlocking the layers you need to overlock. I'm almost back at the start. So to finish here, all I do is I go over the top. Oops. Pull it through. Then I stop, lift my needles up, press the foot up, pull my work out, and leave my tail. Now to finish your shorts, you go around, trim all your loose threads. If you've got loose threads, trim them all up. You can give them an iron, turn them inside out or the right way around. I've got lots of loose threads I need to trim. There you have your finished shorts. If you were a little bit concerned about this seam allowance here, you could top stitch that down flat if you wanted to, but that's up to you. I think if you do have the time, you should top stitch that seam allowance so it sits flat here at the top of the shorts where it joins the waistband. So I'm going to do that now quickly, and I'm going to start at the centre back, which is here. I know because I've got my crotch seam and my waist joining seam. I'm going to pop that under. Now I need to make sure that that seam allowance is pointing down towards the body of the shorts. And I need to also make sure that it is nice and flat and open. So I'm going to do a foot's width as my measurement. So nice and close to the join. And I'm going to go around. Now I'm going to stop every so often to readjust, and you will have to give that a stretch, your elastic a stretch, so you can get over some points. I'm going to hold it from the front and the back and continue to top stitch that down. Readjust, make sure it's the seam allowance is facing the right way. Make sure it's nice and flat and continue. So I'm going to stop, readjust, get some of these gathers out of the way. You can just move them along and continue. Now here you've got a real thick part, so you will need to pull it from the back and slowly go over that. It's very thick and the machine won't like it. Just check, yep, make sure my seam allowance is facing the body of the shorts and continue. Stop, readjust. Check your seam allowance, making sure you're only stitching what you need to, nothing's getting in the way. Again, you've got this thick part, so you'll need to pull it from the back, hold that flat. Go nice and slow, you can toe tap over that and gently pull it. It's a real thick bit, didn't like that. Or use your hand wheel. Stop, readjust, and keep going. Alright, now I'm almost back at the start. So I can do my reverse stitch over that. Take up lever up, press the foot up, and there we go. So we'll have a look at that. We did that top stitch, and it just keeps that seam allowance nice and flat, and it gives it a nice finish as well. Okay. So that's my waistband. Depending on how tight you pull your elastic, you'll have more of a gathered paper bag finish or you'll have less. But that's up to you and depends on how tight you want it. Okay, so that is it. Last step for the shorts.